going to the field this week.
Welcome back, glad you're here. I'm leaving for the field tomorrow. Figured I would make a quick video before we do that. Part of the reason I got this camera was the guided features that it has, the guided modes, easy modes, whatever you want to call it. So I thought it'd be cool to kind of go over each of the modes that I've used so far and talk about what I like or dislike about them and how that's kind of worked into the shots that we've taken so far on this channel. So let's get into it. So in these modes at the top, when we turn the camera on, you've got your portrait, landscape, close-ups, and sports. For instance, let's go to landscape because that's what I was shooting at the beach last week. Really, the only thing it's going to let me control is the brightness down here, and then like what the timer is or how many shots it's going to take. If I come into the viewfinder, once I have that setting made, down here at the bottom, no matter how many times I hit info, there's no information on the aperture, the ISO, or the shutter speed. It's just not there. If I hit up here, there's the ISO button. If I hit that, not available in this mode. Basically with this, it's saying like, hey, we know you're shooting a landscape. We know what's best to make that photo come out the best way, so just trust us, which is great when it comes to taking good photos. But as far as someone who's trying to learn to get better at photography and an overall understanding of photography, it doesn't do me any good. I don't know what it's set at, and I don't know what it's shooting for. It basically just comes down to framing. And that goes for all these modes, all the preset modes. And this is where you get a little bit more control. So you've got the sliding scale here, and it tells you, if you want your background more blurry or if you want it sharp, which for a landscape, yeah, I want it, a sharper image. If I'm taking a portrait, okay, a little bit more blurry, and aperture has the priority in this mode. So once I set my f-stop where I want it, if I come back in here to do this, yeah, it's gonna show me what my aperture is, and it's even gonna let me manipulate the ISO. So that ISO button lets me change what I want. I can change that ISO, or I can bring it all the way down to auto. But what's missing now is the shutter speed. I have no control over the shutter speed. If we come into shutter priority, it's the same thing. This is what I showed last week. It's got that sliding scale of, do you want more of that motion blur or do you want something frozen in time? And then you can manipulate that slider based on what you're trying to accomplish. Okay, and then same thing, going to that viewfinder. Now my shutter speed is there, but my aperture is gone. The camera is essentially controlling that for me, which is great. But again, like learning the relationship between shutter speed and aperture, I think are really important to grow as a photographer. So it's obviously something that I want to learn. So even if it was going to do it for me, I think it would still be really cool if it showed me what it was, so I knew the relationship that I was looking at when it comes to manipulating shutter speed and having the aperture kind of go hand in hand. So now if we move to manual mode, we come in here, now I've got all three. So now I can manipulate my shutter speed. So let's say I was going back to doing those beach shots where I had my shutter speed turned up. I come down here and I can manipulate that aperture. I want to put that low, and now ISO, same thing. I can change my ISO, or I can just set it to auto. And now when I come into my viewfinder, I've got all that information down at the bottom, and I can just press it. I can change that shutter speed, which you can already tell how that's changing the amount of light that's coming into that viewfinder. So now it's giving me that idea of like, oh, okay, so shutter speed is a lot faster. Go back, come in here, and now if I manipulate, now you can see that relationship where if my shutter speed is turned up high and I start increasing the number on an aperture, now it's completely blacked out. All right, and then you can come in and you can do your ISO, but that, like, the more light you add, it's going to be grainy, and then you can find out, you turn it all the way up, it's still not enough because those settings are completely backwards, and that's just not going to work. So in the rule of thirds video, I was talking about how I wanted to use these three things to get the shots that I wanted, but it wasn't coming out the way that I had hoped. In hindsight, especially after last week's shoot, I realize now that that is because I was shooting indoors with really bad lighting. So these relationships weren't working out the way they're supposed to and the way they're designed to. Now, fast forward a couple weeks, take this camera to the beach to shoot the photos that I was shooting last week, and now all of a sudden the relationships that I thought I understood amongst these three things is actually panning out the way that I expected it to and the way that it's supposed to. And I'm really happy with how the shots came out. So yes, it took a lot of shots, and there's a lot of shots that I took that didn't make it into last week's video, but it's a learning curve. So at least now I can see what I'm manipulating and see what the relationship between the three of them are and at least I'm gaining knowledge on understanding how these work, rather than just trusting the camera to say, hey, you're gonna be in landscape, don't worry about it, we've got it. And the photo might come out great, but I'm not learning anything, I'm not getting any better at understanding photography or my camera. All right, so I know that was super quick, but I felt like it was worth sharing. Now again, there is nothing wrong with landscape mode, close-up mode, action mode. I've used them all already since I bought the camera. And if you're just trying to take great pictures and have a simple camera that does a lot of the heavy lifting for you and all of the more complicated features of photography, it's perfect. It makes everything so much easier, and you could just go out and do that. And I know the whole point of buying this camera, doing this channel, taking these photos, everything is so that I can take the best pictures during my honeymoon, more specifically of Bora Bora with the ocean and the sky and the sand. Beaches? Beaches probably encompasses all of that. I can probably just say beaches. And the scenery in New Zealand and all of that, and landscape mode would be perfect for that. But I'm trying to personally just get better at photography and understand more about photography and take better pictures. And I'm someone that I don't want to just be like, oh, yeah, I took this picture because I did landscape mode on my camera and that's as much thought as I put into it. And someone would be like, oh, how did you get the sky so blue? Or how did you get the background so blurry? And have the subject just pop like that and maybe like, I put it on portrait mode. Like, I want to be able to speak intelligently about what I'm doing and what I did to get those shots. I just like having a firmer grasp on the concept and the control of how to do it. And that way, if I take a really good picture and I did it in manual mode, like I personally, this is just me, I personally am gonna feel more accomplished with that photo versus one that was just on automatic and the camera did everything it had to do, did its photography magic, and the picture came out great. I'm gonna feel more accomplished if I picked the shutter speed, I picked the relation with the aperture, and adjusted the ISO properly so that that photo came out the way that I wanted it to. Having all that in mind, going back and looking at the photos from the beach photo shoot last week, I'm super proud of them because they were on manual mode. And I adjusted the settings on those and I took those photos and had complete control over those settings. Are they the best photos ever? No, I've had the camera for 2 weeks. But looking at that photo, knowing how fascinated I am with capturing motion in that crystal clear frozen moment, and looking at the camera and being like, okay, shutter speed needs to be this, if that's going to happen then my aperture needs to be this, and it's a little too dark, so if I pump up the ISO I can probably get a little bit more light before it gets grainy. Knowing those three things and then actually going into the camera and making those settings and making those adjustments and having the photo come out the way that it did, for someone who didn't know what those 3 words meant 3 weeks ago, I'm pretty stoked on that. I'm pretty happy with it. I think it bodes well for us moving forward as we figure all this stuff out together. So I know there's not really any photos in this episode, but I wanted to share this with you guys. I am going into the field this week, so I just needed to get something creative done before I went out and suffered for 12 days. Here, look at this. Hey Siri, what's the 5-day forecast?
Here's the forecast between today and Thursday.
Saturday, rain. Sunday, rain. Tuesday, rain. Wednesday, rain. Friday, rain. Saturday, rain. Sunday, rain. Monday, rain. Rain, 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 rain. So this is my last little dose of creativity and positivity before I go suffer for 12 days. That's gonna do it for this week. If you've got any advice for me on any of these shooting modes, let me know, leave them in the comments below. If this video helped you, or you're just happy to not spend the next 12 days out in the rain, hit that like button. And as always, if you want to hang out every week, you got the subscribe button right there, and I'll see you in the next one.